Hello, welcome to week 7. Week 6 was awesome. I'm so excited to see you guys getting the resize working and using the general update pattern. This is awesome to see. And also, I'm excited to see you guys creating issues for your projects. Managing these issues is a great way to move your project forward and have a sense of, how much more you have to do at any given point in time. So let me talk about what we're going to do this week, week 7. I'm going to go through these one by one. First, let's look at the week 7 reading and lecture. Please read chapter 11, Manipulate View. And let me talk a little bit about the content of this chapter and sort of give you my take on it. This diagram from the beginning of the chapter really sums up the chapter nicely in terms of what it has inside of it. I'd like to talk about each one of these items. Let me talk about change over time. When data visualizations transitioned from being just printed to being on a computer screen, whole new worlds opened up in terms of what you can do, and one of these things is change over time. For example, you could consider the case of Gapminder, where those bubbles are moving around the screen over time as the years go by. That's a kind of change over time. Also, there's visualizations where you can have a drop-down menu and select the X and the Y columns, and then the marks update with some sort of animated transition. And this is also could be considered change over time. And the advantage of changing over time with animated transitions is that your eye can keep track of the marks as they change. So it's more clear to track the changes with animation as opposed to just cutting from one scene to the next. Because if you do that, your eyes can't really follow what's going on. So that's my take on change over time. Now let me talk about select. The first thing I think of with select is tooltips. This is a form of selection where you hover over or near to a mark, and then that effectively selects that mark for more information to pop up around it. There's also a whole other world of things you can do with selection, like select multiple things by maybe holding Control and clicking, or also toggling things by clicking it once to turn it on and then clicking it again to turn it off. And then there's, selecting things by brushing or by, drawing some polygon around your marks. These are all different forms of select. And also, you could consider the color legend as a visualization, and you could select different colors in the color legend by hovering or clicking. This is also select. Now let me talk about navigate. Within item reduction, we've got zoom, geometric or semantic. And we've also got panning or translating, which often, but not always, goes along with zooming. The first thing that comes to my mind when I think about panning and zooming is maps. Maps are perfect for panning and zooming. If you have a map and you zoom in and everything just expands, just as though you were looking at a painting and walking closer to it, this is called geometric zooming. But if you use something like Google Maps, where as you zoom in, more details emerge and the view actually changes depending on how far in you are zoomed, this is called semantic zooming. But it's not just maps where you could have panning and zooming. This could be added to any visualization. For example, a scatter plot with some big circles and clusters of tiny little circles. What if you could, wanted to see more detail in the cluster of the tiny circles? You could add panning and zooming to zoom in to that region and see all the detail that's there. Panning by itself can often happen in time-based views, like, for example, line charts, where you could just drag it, drag the time over. Also, you could zoom there too, but it would just be in one dimension. So rather than expanding in both directions, it would just expand in one direction, maybe X, to show you zooming in on regions of time. There's also constrained zooming. I think this means you can only zoom in so much. Now let me talk about navigating by attribute reduction, slicing, cutting, and projecting. In a way, these are really manipulations of the data that goes into visualizations. One example of slicing is selecting a year from a drop-down menu, or selecting a certain value for one of your categorical attributes from a drop-down menu and then slicing the data to only include that. I mean, it's kind of filtering too. I guess slicing and filtering are sort of similar. Cutting is a lot like panning and zooming, but it's more like you take a region and then you just exclude all the other data values before you pass the data into the visualization. Projecting happens a lot with three-dimensional visualization, and there's a special case of projections, which is map projections. Please watch this 2-minute segment of Tamara Munzner's lecture where she covers the material in this chapter. And also please watch Why All World Maps Are Wrong. This is a really nice video that explains map projections. Next, I'll talk about create an interactive visualization. This is your assignment for the week. And keep in mind, doing this assignment, it should be done in a standalone way, but you can reuse stuff that you may have done already in your project, and also you can reuse the stuff that you get working here by doing the same thing in your project. So even though it's a separate assignment, there's some sort of overlap and cross-pollination with the project. Basically, what I'd like you to do is fork one of your existing examples from blocks.org and add one of the interaction techniques discussed in Chapter 11 to that block. You may add any of these following interaction techniques. And by the way, tooltips, I think it's like too easy, so please don't do tooltips. Please do one of these, something a little more involved than tooltips. With change over time, for example, you can add a menu where selecting something in that menu causes the visualization to change in some way. Then you could have animated transitions. Let me show you an example of that. Here's a scatter plot where you can change what X and Y mean, and as you do that, the thing animates around. This is an example of change over time. You could also do highlighting. For example, hovering over a color legend item can cause all the marks that have that color to pop out and get highlighted. Here's an example of highlighting that you can draw from. You could also add panning and zooming to your visualization. There are some nice examples linked here, like this geometric zooming example, where when you zoom in, things just get bigger. Also, here's an example of panning and zooming on a globe. The code is pretty short for this one, so this might be helpful. Here's a more complicated example that has panning and zooming on a globe and also tooltips. I hope this assignment isn't too challenging, or I haven't left out things that you need to know in order to do it, but good luck trying to add interaction to your visualization, and please don't hesitate to ask for help. If you get stuck on something for more than like a half hour or an hour, please just stop and ask for help in our course Slack. I would hate for you to get bogged down and then get frustrated and sad about not being able to get it to work. So good luck. Next, I'll talk about deploy your project. The idea with this is that you can deploy your project to the web, give it a public URL using GitHub Pages. And I've included this video that shows you how to do this. So I think it should be fairly straightforward to follow along with the video and implement the same changes that I do in the video in your own project. And after doing that, you'll have your project hosted to the web, so you can share a link with anyone. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the participation assignment, Voice Your Frustrations. We're getting to the point where you are going to be experiencing technical difficulties where you're going to run into things that you've never seen before when you try to do your project. And, it's difficult to teach all the little details that you need in order to do this, but I've done my best. But I want to solicit your feedback. What are some things about this course that have been frustrating to you? And this will be useful, I think, like cathartic for everyone to say like, this was really difficult. And it also will be good for me to get the feedback so I can incorporate that into the rest of the course going forward. And hopefully people will be less frustrated. So please voice your frustrations. Don't be shy. All right, that's what we're going to do in week 7. Looking forward to seeing your work and interacting with you all. So have a good week.